If you have some extra money sitting around in a savings account right now and you aren't sure what to do with it, you might want to consider a certificate of deposit. We recently did a video about why certificates of deposit are so interesting right now in a high interest rate environment. But in this video, we're going to talk about the types of CDs that are available and how to choose the best one for you. Joining me today is Spencer Tierney, the CD expert at NerdWallet. Spencer and I are not financial advisors, and this video does not constitute financial advice. All right, so let's say you do have some kind of lump sum of money, whether it's from savings or a windfall like an inheritance or a bonus at work or a tax refund, and you decided that you want to pull the trigger on getting a certificate of deposit. Where do you start? Like, how do you determine what your term length is going to be and what kind of bank you want to choose?
Yeah, so there are a couple different things you'd want to know. First, like, where do you want to have that CD? So let's say you're working with a certified financial planner, you probably are working more with like brokered CDs or a brokerage, which is an investment firm. And that's a whole separate thing that I'll discuss in a minute. But the primary place that a lot of people will find CDs are at banks and credit unions, which are like the not-for-profit equivalent of a bank. And so you'd open them just like you would a normal bank account. And there is just that minimum opening deposit to consider. And this amount can vary from $0 to 10,000 or even 100,000, which is also called the jumbo CD. And really the minimum is more of it's not really even a guidepost. It's just what to know as far as like barriers to entry. Honestly, it's sort of like, one, you look at rates and figure that out. But more importantly, you look at like, when will I need this money and how much time does it make sense to commit it to?
So say you have a savings goal, like you want to buy a house, but you know that you're not going to be ready to take that jump until 3 years from now. So in that case, you would probably look at a CD that's about that length of time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you'd kind of time up when you need that money. And it's important to remember, like, that maturity dates. It's a very important date in your calendar. Then you have like, maybe 7 to 10 days as a grace period to withdraw that money for free before a lot of banks may auto renew that CD. So yeah, you just kind of like time it up with your savings when you need that money.
So the kind of certificates of deposit that we're talking about are primarily offered at banks. Can you talk a little bit more about how CDs relate to other kinds of bank accounts like checking and savings?
Yeah, I'd like to think of CDs somewhat as the third wheel of a banking deposit relationship. So checking accounts for your spending, savings accounts for your like very short-term savings, including emergency fund money. And then CDs are kind of in the middle, and like you don't need it to ride the bike, metaphorical bike here, but they are something that can be handy for some of your savings. And for sure, not all. You definitely want to have probably like savings and then CDs. It's very much like an add-on type of account. But again, if you don't want to mess with this kind of account, you're like, oh, I want my access to my money, then high yield savings accounts are a really good option. And that those rates have also gone up in this environment. And then the middle category between high yield savings accounts and high yield CDs is kind of the no penalty CD, which is very much like kind of in that space of, oh, okay, well, it's sort of like a savings account in that you're not going to be penalized for early withdrawal, but it's somewhat like a CD because it has a fixed rate and a fixed term. And when you cash out, usually there are no partial withdrawals. So it's very much like one and done, all in one deal when you're deciding, okay, I'm going to take that money out. There are a few other CD categories. There's add-on CDs where they make that exception that you can add on CDs. There's also the bump up or bump rate CD, which allows you to choose to have a higher rate with the bank's permission at a certain time in your CD term. And then there's also the step up CD, which is very much cousin to bump up CD. But the bank basically decides, okay, now here's when the rate increase will happen instead of you deciding that. So all things to consider. One thing about all these specialty CDs is that they're not as common as just your standard CD. So they can be cool to find, but remember that the rate is the most important part. Minimum deposit is a good thing to recognize, but you probably want to go farther than the minimum deposit if it's low, because you're just thinking about your savings deposit. You're not thinking about, trying to just have like a little bit of money. It's usually a good sum that you want to be protecting for future purchase.
Right. If a CD says it has no minimum opening deposit, that can't be great. But if you're only putting maybe a couple dollars in, that interest is going to be teeny tiny in comparison to just having it on hand. Like you'd probably have it more use for it on your day to day instead of just keeping it locked away for a while.
Oh yeah, completely. Like, yeah, in theory, you can open it with this small amount of money, but right. Yeah. You want to think practically speaking, why does a CD make sense for me?
What are some strategies that you can use to potentially prolong your CD or get the most out of it over a length of time if you do decide to keep it longer than the initial term length?
So there are three main strategies that I'm aware of. There are probably tons more, but CD ladder is one. So this is a very traditional method in which you stagger CD terms and you open multiple CDs at the same time and they all will mature at different terms. So maybe you have like a standard CD ladder is like 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year. You'd have equal amounts in each of those CDs. You kind of have the best of both worlds, the best of the short-term CDs, which give you more frequent access to your money, and the longer-term CDs, which the longer the CD term, the higher their CD rate usually. So then you get to take advantage of those higher rates. And every time that a CD expires, usually in this case, our CD example, every year, then you have that money and a choice between, do I put the funds that were in that maturing CD into a new CD, maybe like a longer 5-year term CD, or do I withdraw it because I actually need that money now? So CD ladder can be great for that. The cons are that you are dealing with multiple CDs, right? So the maturity dates are things that you need to be aware of, and you want to like make sure that, not only are you organized with that, but you also know what you want to do with that money, since you only have a grace period after a CD matures that's roughly maybe 7 to 10 days. And then from there, you can choose what to do with that CD.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds helpful, especially if you don't know what the economy is going to be doing for a while, or if it's been a really volatile year, right? So you're able to know what your money is going to earn for sure over a length of time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we focus on CD ladders in particular, because the way that they are diversifying your CD terms and diversifying where your money is at rates that are changing at different times. So you would be in this CD ladder, which you have 1 to 5 year CDs. You're still opening one more CD, hypothetically, at the 5-year mark, so that you're basically like staggering that every year you get access to some of those funds and take advantage of future high rates at different times. The next one is kind of a fun term, CD barbell. It's a lot more basic in that it's just mainly 2 different ends of the CD spectrum. You got more of like the 5-year or 4-year and the 6-month or 1 year. And the reason why you might do this is that you want to take advantage of where higher rates are right now with the longer term CDs, but you don't want to commit all your money. You may think that CDs may go up a little bit more. So the short-term CD is expiring at a faster rate so that you can consider in a shorter term fashion where you want that money to go next, whether that's into a long-term CD to join the other long-term CD, or you're like, oh, you know what? The economy is looking in a different direction for me, and I think that I actually want this money to be invested in stocks or bonds or another type of vehicle maybe. And the cons for that, you don't get the same diversification that you would with a CD ladder. You don't have the middle terms, like maybe it's a 3 or 2 year CD kind of thing necessarily. And it is a little bit more of a lopsided model that, you just kind of like deal with. And then the last thing just to talk about is the CD bullet. And a CD bullet is almost like the opposite of a CD ladder in that instead of opening CDs with different terms that will expire at different times, it's actually opening CDs at different times and they all expire around the same time. So it's more like maybe 5 years from now you need this money. Because CDs lock your funds in and you can't get any more funds in there to contribute over time like a regular CD, kind of like, maybe it sucks and you're like, oh my God, I have way more that I want to put in over time into a CD. Then you have like 5 years, a 5-year CD is your first one maybe. You put in the money you have dedicated out, and then 2 years go by, then you open a 3-year CD for more of the funds that you've made, and then another 2 years go by, and then your last year, your 4th year, you put in the final 1-year CD. And then all those 3 CDs would expire at the same time. And that can be like good, especially for thinking through you're protecting money in different chunks. But remember that you're not reinvesting that money. The pressure is on to make sure that the maturity date is when you remember to cash out all that money and go from there. Because otherwise you can end up with like wildly different renewed CD terms.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like CDs in general are sort of like setting up a future gift to yourself. But like the bullet is like, whoa, you get, 3 to 5 presents at once because all those CDs are maturing at the same time, right?
I love the idea of a CD as a future gift to yourself. That honestly that is the line.
Yeah. It's like, you got to hide it away till Christmas. You can't open it until then. Christmas being the metaphorical maturity date of the CD. So that's a really interesting idea. But of course, I imagine a lot of that's going to depend on your personal financial situation and whether you have enough to put in a CD at those different time frames, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one other comment from earlier, the brokered CD model is a little bit different in that you're not opening a bank account opening a CD like you would another bank account. It's more of that you have a brokerage account at a brokerage. Maybe you have like some financial advisor that's recommending that a cash portion of your portfolio would go towards CDs. And that is a different model. In a brokerage, you are buying or selling CDs. There's no early withdrawal penalty. The brokered CDs are actually originated from banks and credit unions. Like they come to the brokerage and basically are able to issue from there. It is a little bit different in that, yeah, you have less control. You don't know, what the rates are gonna be or even day to day. Whereas at a bank, they're a little bit more stable and steady. Right now, we're in an environment where, yes, if you're at an online bank or looking for a bit, yeah, they might change and go up. But with a brokerage, you might see you're basically thinking about it more of like a trading asset. It can be a little bit harder if you're a newer investor to understand how to go about selling a CD in this like maybe secondary market. There might be trading fees. So the things that go with brokered CDs are more complex. And that's why we're focused more on the easy and more accessible bank and credit union CDs. And one thing, at a credit union, they're called share certificates, which I forgot to mention.
So since we are in a really different kind of year here in 2022 with rates being higher, what do you suggest if in a couple of years from now we see interest rates go down again? Do you think CDs are still a good idea to pursue at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, trying to evangelize CDs by any means. I think CDs definitely have their time and place. And for a lot of people, they probably don't make sense, honestly. They're very much a specific use case kind of vehicle. But all that said, these locked box savings accounts do make sense for some people. And thus, you don't want to be chasing rates necessarily or trying to time the stock market or time any market really when it comes to CDs. The financial conditions a few years or even a few months from now might be very different. So it really comes down to your savings goals. Of course, it definitely is nice to know, okay, CDs are really doing well right now, but you don't want to rush a decision if you really don't know. It's almost like there's a new incentive if rates are up. If rates are down, then maybe you think elsewhere or diversify a little bit more than you would when rates are up. And you're like, oh, I can actually put a little bit more funds here than I would, in a low rate environment. So all that to say that regardless of what the Federal Reserve decides to do, CDs can make sense based on your savings needs. Higher rates are a bonus.
CDs can be a great option for your money, but they aren't the only option. High-yield savings accounts are earning rates around 3 to 4%, and historically the stock market has earned rates of 7 to 10% over a long enough period of time. However, interest rates for both savings accounts and the stock market can be quite volatile and even risky. CDs, however, lock in a rate for a long period of time that is a guaranteed return on your funds, so they can be great for combating inflation or just setting aside your money that you know is going to earn a guaranteed return. I'm Chanel Bissett, and I'm a banking writer with NerdWallet. If you're interested in opening a CD and want to compare rates, head to our site. And if you feel like you learned something from this video, like and subscribe.